Awesome. Okay. Well, hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining our webinar. I'm Josh Frank. I'm a product marketer on our DevOps team, and I'll be introducing our speakers and facilitating Q&A towards the end of the webinar. I think we have a really exciting topic for everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about building great developer experiences, and we have an awesome crew here to have that conversation. So we have Sven Peters, Atlassian's developer advocate. Sven, great to have you.
Thanks, Josh. Happy to be here.
So Sven is Atlassian's resident expert on trends in software development and looking at what makes dev teams effective. He has 20 years of experience in writing code and leading teams. Today, pretty much travels around the world to share his point of view on DevOps and how dev teams can achieve their full potential. So I'm excited to have him here to talk on the subject of building better developer experiences today. I'm also really happy to introduce Dan Tao, the head of engineering for DevOps at Atlassian. Dan, great to have you on the call.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Excited to be here.
So in addition to leading a large engineering organization at Atlassian, he also oversees the organization responsible for all developer-focused products, and that includes some initiatives to improve the developer experience internally at Atlassian as well. In addition, Dan also has a long track record of engineering leadership experience. So again, super great to have Dan here with us. For the first part of the presentation, we'll have Sven covering how to build a joyful developer culture. And then we'll swap over to Dan. We'll talk a little bit more about tools. And after that, we'll hang out and answer questions up until the end of the hour. And that tees me up just for a little bit of housekeeping for this webinar. I mentioned we'll be answering questions, so please make sure to ask questions throughout the presentation. We also have a team of Atlassians here answering questions, so you may get a chat response to your question as well. Other housekeeping is we'll send out a copy of the recording along with other helpful resources after the webinar, so keep a lookout for that email. Last thing I'll mention is we have included links to a bunch of helpful resources here in the webinar console, particularly about the tools part of our presentation. A big part of our talk about creating developer experiences is around integrating tools, and we have several write-ups and links that can help you discover how to do that. So for example, we link to our plugin to Jira series, which is all about helping people discover integrations with Jira. One of my favorite integrations highlighted in our plugin to Jira series that I know Dan will talk about is the Jira integration with CI/CD tools, which brings a lot of helpful context into Jira, helping everyone on the team know the status of builds and deployments. The integration also helps your developers stay focused and avoid unnecessary context switching because, for example, they can automate away informing others of deployment status. But in any case, I'll let you explore those resources, but I highly recommend that you check them out. So that's the quick housekeeping for a webinar. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Sven.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. All right, welcome from my side. So let's start with looking at what happened actually in the last 10 years in software development, and there's happening a lot of things. So if we look back, like the cloud came up the last 10 years and have actually changed the way we develop software. Then we put now everything into small little containers and spin those up and run those containers and make them observable. And we run everything in small microservices. Now, this has changed the way we develop software because now we have to also think about just like, is the other microservice on the other side there? And we need to just like have API contracts between those microservices. Security and governance, now that everything runs in the cloud, we need to make our cloud apps more secure, right? And then, yeah, thank you, Werner Vogel, for you build it, you run it. Now we also own our services in production or microservices in production and have to maintain those, right? And have to just like support those. Now, this is all put on the shoulders of developers in the last 10 years. So obviously, developers have more cognitive load, right? There's more in developers' brains now that we put into this, right? And nowadays, everyone just like talks about just like, oh, what's with developer productivity, right? Duh, right? If we put more on the shoulders of developers, okay, we just like see productivity decrease. But don't get me wrong, I think all the things that we just saw are pretty good. So where does this productivity obsession come from? If you're okay with that, I would travel back with you in time, 125 years back in time, right? I count to 3, and then we travel back in time. 1, 2, 3. Here we go. So here we are in the Bethlehem Steel Factory 125 years ago. And the Bethlehem Steel Factory had some productivity issues. Actually, they hired a person to just like tackle those productivity issues. His name was Frederick Winslow Taylor. You might have heard of him, famous for his Taylorism. So what Frederick Winslow Taylor did was, first he was watching the workers, right? And then he put out his stopwatch and just like timed everything that what the workers were doing. And the first thing that he found was pretty obvious. He looked at the shuffles, and when the workers were shuffling coal, right, then a lot of coal was falling left and right from the shuffle. So he gave them better shuffles. So awesome tooling is a way to just like where he increased productivity. The second thing, what he just like measured was just like how much a person could carry throughout the day. And obviously this was decreasing throughout the day. So what he did was actually he gave them more pauses, more breaks in between. So the workers could carry actually quite the same amount than in the start of the day and also at the end of the day. All in all, Frederick Winslow Taylor increased the productivity of the factory workers by 400%. Wow, this is amazing. But everything comes with a flip side, right? You saw just like that. The workers are now only doing repetitive tasks. Everything is just like very, very timed down to the second, and they were doing repetitive tasks. But someone has to do the thinking now, right? Someone has to just like say the workers what to do. And that were the managers. So guess what? This is 125 years ago, right? And now let's look with that view on developer productivity. How do we measure developer productivity? And it's a little bit the human nature that we fall back into just like habits that we have been seen working, right? So when I started, developer productivity was measured in lines of code. Actually, my boss wanted me to count the lines of code to just like see how productive we were throughout the week. Not a good productivity measure, we know that, right? Or just like how much issues we put into done. There are smaller and larger issues, so also not the best measure to measure the developer productivity. Now, we came then up with story points, right? But story points are actually, it's just an estimation. So it is a 3 or a 5 or what? So this is an estimation. Now it turns out when you develop the story, right, that it can take longer actually because there was unforeseen things happening. We made that easier with t-shirt sizes, didn't help easier to really measure the productivity of developers. And now we're just like down to cycle times and deployment frequency, which I think it's a better measurement, but still, right? As I said, it's human nature. We fall back into the Taylorism way of measuring it, because then we say, okay, how do we increase it? How can we get 10% more story points or 20% faster pull request? Yeah, thank you very much, Frederick Winslow Taylor. We're still there. So that's why we think at Atlassian, it is all about developer joy. It's about the developer experience that we want to build. And guess what? If you build great quality code and you develop with fast progress and you create great value for your customers, you really enjoy what you're doing, you also gain productivity, right? And for that, you need empowered teams. And let me talk to you a little bit about how you empower your teams to do things. So I did a survey recently and asked developers just like, what is the number one thing that you're unsatisfied with? And guess what? It is developer wait time. Developers hate to wait, right? So actually 70% of the participants thinks it's important that we tackle this, but just 23% were satisfied with their developer wait time. It's all about how the work flows through our systems. And the best way is that we don't have dependencies at all. We don't have to stop and wait for for a system or for other people to work and wait them to finish the tasks. So that's why autonomous teams are so important, and we empower those autonomous teams, right? So highly autonomous teams, but also highly aligned. But what does that mean, autonomous teams, right? For a development team, it means just like, okay, we have designers on the team, we have a tester on the team, we have ops people, we have product managers. But to be also just like honest, there is in most teams there is no place for a full-time designer or a full-time tester. So how do we give people the autonomy to do things, or developers the autonomy to do things themselves and cut down the dependencies, right? How do we all cut down on the dependencies and increase the autonomy? The answer is we help the developers a little bit by that. Let me tell you about just like how you can do that. So we have this example for a designer in the team, just like waiting for a designer to do a design. So at Atlassian, we are using a design system. So developers can actually use that design system to just like add something like a drop-down menu or a date time picker, right? We don't need a designer for that. Developers can do that themselves because the designers gave the developers the design system. Quality engineers, also here, right? The quality engineer could be a bottleneck, right? We need to wait until the quality engineer has actually tested our software, right? So what we do is actually we call it quality assistance. So we do a kickoff with the developers, the quality engineer and the developer doing a kickoff, and they write the testing notes, right? The exploratory tests. And at the end, when the developer has actually developed the feature, the developer can self-test the feature with the exploratory test that they have written before. So no dependency on the quality engineer anymore to deploy the software into production. And also IT operations, right? So we actually give people a developer platform. You might have heard of developer platforms where you can just like spin up a whole software development tool chain easily without the IT people involved. All you need a test database, right? In the old days, just like you needed to ask IT for the test database, but now you can do it yourself with a developer platform. So in this way, we just like give the developer teams more autonomy and help them also to just like also lower their cognitive load. Now you want to build a great team, right? And you need some team guidance. Also there, we give teams something to guide them to just like improve the way they are actually working. And we call this the team playbook. It's a free resources of plays that you can do with your team. You can just like go to atlassian.com/team playbook and look at those 50 plays that we have in the team playbook. I would just like give you a short example here what a play looks like by introducing you the roles and responsibility play. So if you have just like problems with responsibilities in your team, so who's owning what, and which roles these responsibilities belong to, the roles and responsibility play is a great way to tackle those things and to talk about it as a team. So the first thing that you do in this play is just like to identify the roles. That might be a very easy thing to do, right? Let's assume you have a team of a designer, a product manager, and some developers. What you do then is just like you write down individually the responsibility, what you think like what these roles are responsible for. And then you just like come together and put everyone's responsibilities on the page, right? And then you just like see, oh, we agree on these responsibilities, but we actually disagree on this responsibilities. I thought it's your responsibility, you think it's my responsibility, or we have an overlapping responsibility. So you discuss these things out and just like talk about those responsibility and where do they belong, right? Of course, we're using a Confluence template for that. You can just like do it directly in Confluence, right? So you can run this play on your own. You think you can run this play on your own? You might say it's like, but I'm not a coach. I'm not a team coach. I can't do that, right? Yeah. So my answer to that is I'm not a cook, right? I'm not a cook, but what I can do, I can create those dishes, right? I'm not a professional cook, but I can create those dishes. And it's very easy for me because Jamie Oliver, right? He wrote everything down, right? In a cookbook. So I can just like follow the recipe in the cookbook and make this dish. It's the same actually with a team playbook. So we have designed it so you can run this place yourself, right? You see, just like here, this is an overview. This is how long it takes to run this play and to prep for it. And this is how many people you need. And then you get all the ingredients, everything that you need to run this play in person or remotely. And then also here we have some pre-cooked things for you, like a Confluence template. And also here's the preparation, what you have to prepare to run this play. And then it's a step-by-step introduction, instruction, how to run this play. So it's easy for everyone to just like follow the instructions and run this play, right? So the team playbook is a great way to guide your team. And as I said, there are more plays in the team playbook, and I can highly encourage you to try this out. So now I want to hand over to Dan to talk to you about just like how you as an empowered team gain more visibility in your software development life cycle, actually, to help improve your teams.
Thanks, Sven. Okay, awesome. So first of all, I want to give a huge +1, +100 to everything Sven said, from focusing on developer joy, all the way to building, a culture of improvement and trying to make your developers productive by reducing cognitive load. I think as an engineering leader, one of the main things you're always looking to do is how can I empower my teams to be more effective? And a big part of that is the selection of the tools that you're going to give them to do their jobs, all the way back to the Taylor example that Sven mentioned I loved that of giving the workers a better shovel, right? I mean, what are the better shovels of today? I think is one of the kind of key questions for any engineering leader. And so, anyone in my position, I'm the head of engineering for a large engineering team within Atlassian, as Josh said. And any engineering leader in my position sort of has this kind of question in front of them when it comes to tool selection. It is, do I select kind of one by one all the tools that I think my teams need? Or is it better to sort of pick like one kind of whole solution that gives them everything, kind of out of the box, all connected from day one? There's no right answer to this. With anything else, it's a trade-off. There's pros and cons. Some of the advantages of kind of going best in breed and selecting your tools one by one, you can maximize productivity on individual tasks. So, the shovel, the pickaxe, the et cetera, each thing you pick the one that sort of works the best for that task. This is also a really good way to go about, letting your developers tell you which tools they really enjoy using, and allowing them to sort of have an influence over the selection of tools you provide to them. And lastly, you can kind of optimize for the needs of your organization. Maybe your organization, you do have certain security requirements, for example. Maybe you don't have the same sort of requirements when it comes to reliability or quality or other things. And so you can sort of pick the tools that you need for the areas that you're optimizing for. In contrast, when you go with an all-in-one solution, obviously you give your teams a more seamless experience, which is valuable on its own. You also reduced context switching costs, which is one of the big challenges when you go with the best of breed approach. Is you got different tools for different things, and all the information tends to be pretty sprawling, and you need to go searching for it oftentimes. And finally, you really want everyone working on your software teams to have a shared view of the world. So everyone's on the same page. Everybody knows who's doing what, where certain ideas, requirements, et cetera, came from, where the designs are, all these things. It's challenging when your teams are in all these different tools. Whereas when you go with an all-in-one approach, you can sort of have a little bit more of a consistent view of things. So there's pros and cons on both sides. The truth is, and the message I want to leave you with as an engineering leader from Atlassian is, you don't actually have to choose between these two approaches. There is a complementary approach that we really believe in at Atlassian. That's basically to choose the tools that work best for your teams, and then connect them together to sort of get the best of breed, all of the advantages of the best of breed approach, without all the context switching and all the cognitive load that Sven mentioned before that comes with that, and the reduced developer joy and developer productivity that goes along with that increased cognitive load. So I'm just going to go through some examples of some of the things that we've provided in Jira Software specifically. And And a lot of these are going to be covered in much more depth in that awesome plugin to Jira series that Josh was mentioning earlier. So I definitely encourage you all to check that out. But like I said, I'm going to sort of walk you through some examples of this just on a practical level as an engineering leader. What does connecting your tools together look like, and how does that benefit your developers? So to start with, I'll show what we call the development panel on the Jira issue view. This is when you connect your Git hosting tool, so that can be Bitbucket Cloud, which is our own product, as well as GitHub, GitLab, any SCM provider where you can store your Git repositories and do pull requests. If you connect those tools to Jira, then right there in Jira, right from the issue view, we can show you, are there any open pull requests? What's the state of them? You can see from this example issue I've shown here that there's a merged pull request. And you can see also, if you connect your CI/CD tool, like pipelines or GitHub Actions or Jenkins, Circle CI, there's too many to name. We'll show you the deployment information, which is, I remember when I started, one of the most common questions that was always asked of any issue that's done is, okay, I see it's done. Is this deployed to production, right? Where is this live? And now in Jira, when you connect those tools, we can show you directly in the Jira issue where it's been deployed, and it link you straight to, as you can see from the development modal there, all of the development information that's related to that ticket. So here you're seeing pull requests, builds, deployments, but you can see from there, we also cover branches, commits, feature flags, which is a really exciting sort of fairly new trend that more and more teams are adopting. And this is just a great example of back to, if you think in the old days, I'll call it, before you connected your tools, your teams would have Jira where they have to track their work for visibility, but then they'd have their code hosting tool where they do their code review and merge their pull request, and they have separate CI/CD tool. And to answer any question about, like, is there PR for this? Is this deployed? What environments is deployed to? Answering each of those questions would require going to a different tool, which is a lot of cognitive load. Frankly, it's a lot of asking around, and it's a lot more of that real killer of productivity that Sven talked about, which is developer wait time, where people are asking each other questions and sort of saying like, oh, I don't know where that information lives. Bob knows about that. Wait for Bob to get back. Or Alice should know where it's deployed. She was looking at the deployments. Like, this pulling all this information into Jira is I think, as an engineering leader, one of the highest leverage things you can do to bring down that wait time, to bring down that cognitive load, to reduce context switching, and to give your teams everything they need. But that's just one example. I promise I won't spend this much time on each example. Here's another example, sort of building off that same notion of reducing context switching. It doesn't just go in one direction. If you use Bitbucket and you've connected Bitbucket to Jira, you can see the Jira issue directly in the pull request view. So you're the author of a pull request, you're reviewing a pull request, you want to see quick context of, like, what was the issue that this work is about. There's the Jira issue right there. You can click on it and it'll bring up the entire issue view with all of that context I just showed you in a modal directly in Bitbucket. Again, not requiring your devs to jump between tools like Bitbucket to Jira, Jira to your CI/CD tool, just in where they are in their flow, showing them the context that they need. And here's one more example, the deployments view in Bitbucket. I love this as an engineering leader. You can see directly from a deployment which issues were included in this deployment. So it's a quick way to get at a glance view. Okay, I know we just deployed something. What was in that? What went out in that deploy? And again, if you have Bitbucket and Jira connected, we'll show you the issues that were included in that deployment directly in Bitbucket. So that's one example when you connect your SCM tools and Jira together. The board view is another great view. The issue view that I showed you a minute ago, that's something that an individual tends to be looking at. It's the work item that they're working on. Something that an entire team looks at, or a manager is more likely to look at, is the board view, which gives you, like, the full view of what the entire team is working on, of course. And that's, this information is no less relevant there. Obviously, there's a little bit more, like, information that we need to present to you. And so that's why we added these board icons So directly on the board view, again, on every single issue your team is working on, you can see sort of the current state of that issue, not just the status, which column it's in, but more context that would ordinarily require your devs to go switch over to another tool. Are there any open pull requests? Are there builds? Are there deployments? And as you can see, you hover over one of these icons, and this little pop-up here, we call it a glance. This glance shows you, just from hovering over that icon, all the key information you need to know. There was a deployment to production. It was successful. It happened 1 day ago. And that's, if you think about, like, I like to always compare these things with what you would have to do in the past before we added these. This is probably, like, best case scenario, a few minutes of trying to find this information. Worst case scenario, like I said before, it could be hours, depending on how specialized this knowledge is and, who on your team knows how to find these things. So this is really democratizing access to this information and making it so anyone on your team, yourself, the developers on the team, but also the cross-functional team members, the designers, the PMs, they can all see from the board view the state of every issue. I showed the deployments view in Bitbucket a moment ago to see, like, for a deployment, what are all the issues included in that deployment? You can do it the other direction. In Jira, you can sort of say, show me all the deployments for all of the issues matching these filters. And that's extremely useful for managers, for PMs, again, for anybody who's sort of asking questions like, what have we shipped lately? What is up, what is sort of on staging, almost ready to go to production? These are questions that used to take wait time, used to require a lot of switching between tools and trying to find the information. Now in Jira, again, when you connect your Jira and your CI/CD tools, there's a deployments view that shows you all of that information at a glance. I also want to call attention to, on this view, there's a insights panel, which brings up some really valuable insights that touches on some of the productivity metrics that Sven touched on earlier. Certainly not the be-all, end-all. We have yet to ship a developer joy insight, but maybe we'll get there. But in the meantime, these are some really valuable metrics: deployment frequency, deployment cycle time, for certainly engineering leaders to look at. But really, we put them right in front of where we expect teams to be looking, because we want an entire team to be striving to continuously improve their performance. And we think showing you how often are you getting deployments to production, how long are you on average, reviewing, how quickly are you reviewing each other's code and getting it merged. Those are really valuable metrics for teams to be looking at on a regular basis. And so, again, there are tools that show this information, but we believe bringing them directly into Jira is a great way to keep you focused on, just the information you care about without having to sort of jump back and forth between tools for every question. 2 more examples, and then I'll be almost done. So this is the release hub in Jira, which we recently added this section where you can add all of your team's related work. So possibly the most clear example yet of all the examples I've shared of pulling all of your tools together and connecting them so that you don't have to jump back and forth between them. In Release Hub, the idea is your entire cross-functional team, developers, designers, PMs, you could have marketing folks in here, ops people, connecting all of their various work items that are related to a software release that your team is putting out together. You can get the entire team to look at the design, to look at dashboards that maybe one of your developers would have set up for operational metrics, analytics dashboards that your data science team might be linking to, support readiness documentation, everything in one place, so that, again, instead of individual team members having to sort of ask around and sort of figure out, like, do we have a support readiness doc for this? Who's the expert on that? Do we have a dashboard ready to go? Providing a single pane of glass for the team to see everything that's related to, we're about to release this. Do we have everything we need? Do we have all the people that we need? And where do we find all those things? I think this is yet again a case of improving developer productivity by not asking your developers to do all of this manual fact-finding, information gathering sort of work, and sort of bringing it where they are, and encouraging the entire team, not just developers, but the full multidisciplinary team, to get together and use a single view that serves everyone. And I did just circle down below, because I particularly like in Release Hub, not only do you see this related work, but you can see all the issues. Every issue that's listed in the release has all that information I've already mentioned, including the pull request information, deployment information, and even feature flag information. So you can see, like, if a feature is partially rolled out, we give you visibility into that as well. Last but not least, I had to include this. This is just this one is close to my heart because we just shipped this, which is if you connect Jira to Confluence, something that we've always had is retrospectives. You know, any Agile team knows about retrospectives. What we haven't done until just recently is make it so that when Jira and Confluence are connected, we prompt you as soon as you complete a sprint to go ahead and create a retro page for it. And that brings you straight into Confluence with a ready-to-go template that lets you fill out your sprint retro. And then the best part is when you've completed the retro, we link back to it in your sprint burn down chart that we show later. And so again, connecting all of your tools together, making it so stuff is easy to find right where you need it. And your developers, who are the people in my experience who are the most frustrated about having to click around and wait for things all the time, sort of have all the information they need sort of directly at one click away at any given point when they're using Jira software. So I know this has been very much focused on Jira software. I don't mean to say this is the only way to do this, but you know, certainly for Atlassian, what I wanted to show is, as an engineering leader, the importance and the value of connecting all of your tools together, and the fact that Atlassian's tools allow you to do that pretty easily. So I'm going to move on from Jira for a moment and talk briefly about a culture of continuous improvement. This is, I think Sven and I have both chatted about this, but it's very much, you know, it's something that your teams need to embody. It's not just about connecting your tools, right? Like, connecting your tools doesn't do much if your teams don't really care about improving how they work. And so if you're trying to foster a culture of improvement, I would start by thinking through the different stages of software delivery. There's some time estimates here, as you can see of what might be typical for some teams of how long each of these stages take. To improve your process as a team, you need to look at every part of this and think of what are ways that we can, you know, move faster from ideate to plan, from planning to actually writing code. How can we get that code reviewed as fast as possible and get it deployed as fast as possible? And of course, I'm saying fast, but we all want not just fast, but fast and high quality, which is really kind of like the ultimate end goal. And so looking at each of those things individually, I think is where you need to start. Again, these are metrics. Every metric comes with its you know, its own set of caveats, but some really key metrics that lots and lots of engineering teams are looking at: PR cycle time, deployment frequency. These are all ways to measure your team's health over time, so that changes you make, you can see if they move things in a positive or negative direction. So these are global engineering metrics that we look at Atlassian, and we encourage lots of other teams to look at on a regular basis. And with that in mind, I do want to take a moment to really advocate for our new developer platform tool, Compass, which is in beta right now and is going GA later this year. Compass is really built around supporting teams and giving teams a view of the software components that they own that lets them to really focus on improving their team health and improving the health of their components, which is a key part of productivity. So you can see here an example component view in Compass that has a customizable set of metrics that you can look at for any team to look at all of their components. Here you can see here the two of the metrics I mentioned before: PR cycle time, deployment frequency. And the idea behind Compass is that you review the same component on a regular basis and you take a look at the metrics that matter to you, which are configurable and you can define in a scorecard. And then the more tools you add, the more metrics you can look at that you might care about. So for example, if you add your incident management tool, this might give you visibility into your mean time to recovery. So that's a starting point, but just looking at this view doesn't really necessarily improve your team performance. That's where rituals come in. So you can see you set baselines. That's what these scorecards are for. Sorry, I don't want to jump ahead too prematurely. The idea behind scorecards is it can show you areas that need your attention. So here, DevOps health being a perfect example. And then where the culture comes in is Compass is designed around performing a weekly ritual. We call it tech ops internally, but in the product, it's called check ops. And the idea is that you use Compass in the same way many teams use Jira software to sort of like look at a board view as a team on a regular basis. In Compass, what we want to encourage is for teams to come take a look at their components on a weekly basis and basically perform this check ops ritual where every week you take a look at all of your metrics, you compare what your performance is to where you'd like for it to be, which again is something you use scorecards to define. And on any given week, performing this ritual on a weekly basis allows you to constantly be mindful, have top of mind where all of your areas for improvement are, and track your progress on sort of basically getting from red to yellow to green on all of the metrics you care about. So in this case, the team might be looking at their build success rate, their deployment frequency. Maybe these are good, but maybe they have some improvements around their mean time to recovery or their change failure rate or things like that. And that's why their DevOps health scorecard needs attention. But by looking at it on a weekly basis, by tracking sort of how the team feels, bringing a little bit of developer joy into the picture, and by sort of doing a sort of mini, let's call it like a lean retro around operational health every week, teams can gradually focus on their health and focus on improvement and use Compass to help themselves improve. One more thing back to continuous improvement. I already showed an insights panel in Jira, but we also show insights panels in other places, including the backlog view. So the backlog insights here show your sprint commitment versus your typical sprint performance. And so again, another opportunity for teams to look at continuous improvement as by showing them the historical performance they've had over the past, several weeks or 2 months, so that you can see, okay, we, typically estimate our sprint and we only deliver this many points. We should adjust how many stories we're pulling into every sprint. And I think one of the most satisfying things to a team is to see themselves improve, to see like, over the past 8 weeks, we've gone from 30 story points to 50 story points or something like that. And we really want to encourage teams to be able to feel that sense of satisfaction as they continually focus on their performance and continually improve. So those are just some examples. I already showed the deployment frequency insights. Those are just some examples of ways you can empower your teams to not just reduce cognitive load, reduce context switching, give them the information they need, but also help them build this culture of constantly looking at areas where they can measure their performance and improve it. And with that, I will hand it back over to you, Sven.
All right, thanks, Dan. So, of course, measuring things is important, right? If you can't measure it, you can't improve it. But you should also ask your developers. They probably know actually which areas you need to improve. So we are doing these regular surveys and asking developers in which areas they're actually satisfied with and which areas and they are not so satisfied with. So we just carve out these areas and then we ask, how important is that for your team? Because different teams, different things are important, right? And then we asked also, how satisfied are you with that? Out of that, we are calculating a so-called opportunity score. And you see, like, if things are just like in the white corridor here, right? Things are all right? Things are good, but we need to tackle those things that fall below this white corridor. And we need to just like give that to teams to help them improve these things, these areas. And then the next thing is, as you just saw, is like try to fix some things, right? Try to give developers time to work on their productivity, to improve the developer experience. So to sum this up, give actually your developers your measurements and then the survey results, some survey results, and give those to your autonomous teams. Give those teams time, actually, to try to fix things, to try to improve their developer quality, their developer flow, and the developer value. Because if you just like work with great quality code and your work flows through your pipelines and you create great value for your customers and you're proud of your doing, actually right in the middle, and I always want to do a Venn diagram in a talk, this is actually where developer joy is happening. And that's also the reason why we all became developers, right? So don't forget to have fun. We became developers for a reason, to have fun in this job. So work on the fun and improve your developer productivity and your developer joy, actually. So thank you. This concludes the presentation part of this webinar. And now we are moving into live Q&A.
Awesome. Okay, well, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Sven, for the great presentations. We have a lot of really great questions from customers pouring in. So thanks for everybody also for asking questions. Actually, even just before I get into the questions, I just want to remind folks on the upper right of your webinar console, there's a resources section. We've posted links to a lot of really cool stuff. So a lot of people have been asking about Compass, which we'll answer questions about. There's a link to get started there. We've got some of our integrations that Dan was talking about and some that he didn't talk about as well. One that I want to highlight is our security and Jira integration that just went live today. So just 100% really recommend folks checking that out. Integrations with a lot of popular security testing tools like Sneak, Mend, Stackhawk, JFrog. So just a lot of really exciting stuff in the resources. I think stuff that will be really helpful. So encourage everyone to check it out. So with that, we've got a handful of questions. I'm just gonna start picking out questions that I see. So one, let's start with Dan on this one. What are some common missteps you've seen when it comes to developer experience? Can you talk both on that from like a culture and tools standpoint, Dan?
Sure. Can you hear me? Just making sure. Cool. So yeah, some common missteps. I feel like I touched on this a little bit earlier during the slides, but I'll sort of dig in a little more. I think if you just look at tools in isolation, like this tool is the best thing for this task and this tool is the best thing for this other task, but you're not considering the sort of holistic developer experience of, different tools means different people know different things and have expertise in different tools. Your information can become very siloed in these different tools, and the context switching costs on your teams can be really significant. So I think one misstep is not considering that the sort of cost of context switching and information siloing, which is why, as I said, I think it's so important to connect all your tools together. Two other missteps that come to mind is just simply not asking your teams what their preferences are and what their needs are. I've seen customers and companies do this where they sort of have a centralized team that does an evaluation of all these tools and is like, we've decided this is the best tool for us, but it's like, what about the people that you're expecting to use the tool on a daily basis? Did you consult them? And so I think, asking teams what tools they're interested in and what sort of requirements they have is really important. And lastly, I've also seen it happen where a company will spend a lot of time doing this evaluation of different tools and choosing one, and then not investing like that sort of last mile of actually communicating within your organization to everyone to say, hey, we've selected this tool, we're paying for it, like we think it'll provide a lot of value to you. Sometimes just that communication internally of what tool we've selected and why and what value we expect you to get out of it is dropped, and then it's sort of like, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, did it really make a sound? It's like, if you purchase a tool and you don't tell your teams about it or explain to them how it's going to help them, have you just wasted your money? And so all of those things, I think accounting for the holistic experience of your devs together, actually asking your teams what tools they would like to use and why, and finally communicating internally what tools you've selected, I think are all really important things that a lot of companies get wrong.
Yeah, great tips, Dan. Thank you. Sven, did you have any other thing you wanted to add to common missteps folks make in regards to dev experience?
I mean, it's always the change thing. If you just like want to change everything at once, that's probably a bad advice to do. People are just like overwhelmed with too many changes. So just like change one thing at a time. That would be my recommendation here, in terms of how you just like change to a different kind of culture that you want to work towards for.
Thanks, Sven. So there's a couple questions here about the Atlassian playbook. I'll just roll through some of those. So we talked a little bit about the Atlassian playbook. Highly recommend everyone check that out. Are there any plays from the Atlassian playbook that you would recommend dev teams try out specifically, Sven?
So not only dev teams, I thought so. We just like ran a lot of research where teams are struggling, and the largest area where teams are struggling is actually to get a shared understanding. So we have bundled 4 plays. One was the roles and responsibility play that I just presented. So this is a play that you definitely should try out. When you want to start with something on shared understanding with your team, the team poster, right? To have just like your goals, your mission, all of this on one poster and what your team is all about is also a great play to get to a common understanding of where you're moving in as a team. Then working agreements is also a great play to just like agree on what you want to work on, and how you want to work together as a team. What are the communication channels you want to use? Are we using email? Are we using Slack for that? So also this is a great play that gives more clarity into these areas. And then it's a rather new play called the network of teams. And I've run that with a couple of teams, and it just gives you a little bit of an idea which teams you depend on and how the relationships are between those teams. So all of these 4 plays, I would just like say, if you want to get a better shared understanding inside the team, these are the ones that you should try out or just like run. But please not everything at once. Just like at the advice that I gave before, right? Just like change one thing at a time.
So there's a related question here. Someone says, I really enjoy the concept of the team playbook. Do you have any recommendations for the ideal time to hold workshops with the team? Is this the type of thing you set aside a significant chunk of the day for, or is it something you just incorporate into a sprint ceremony?
Yeah, good question. So I would just like first just like take one play. Don't run them all in just like one workshop. That would just like overwhelm you and doesn't give you also the results. Just like run one play and rerun those plays after a certain kind of time, right? So roles and responsibility would be good to rerun it maybe after 3 months and see just like if things have changed and evolved. So just like take one, and there's a play in the team playbook. I would just like to point that out, called the Team Health Monitor. And it diagnoses your team where you're struggling with, and it gives you a little bit of pointer also on where you can improve, on which area you can improve. And it gives you also pointers to which play will help to improve those areas. So if you want to start with something, start with a Team Health Monitor. It's also good advice to run this regularly to see if you just like improve. but start with the team health monitor to just like identify which play would be the best for our team to run, and then just like run this one play, and please don't do a whole workshop with all 50 plays and just like squeezing it into a whole day or a whole week.
Yeah, good advice, Sven. One last question on this, and I think it'd be great to hear from both Dan and Sven on this. But someone asked, for teams that have low engagement, how do you get them engaged with these type of activities? Sven, maybe if you want to start, and then Dan can add any thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think talking openly about just like where you as a team struggles, and I mentioned again the team health monitor there, to help teams to understand that they may don't have a shared understanding, even though they think they have. It shows just like the way. So just like talking openly with the team about just like, okay, we're struggling in that area and we need to improve that, helps maybe to raise more awareness of these areas and on your team health, that you need to improve something, even though everyone thinks everything is okay and we don't need this kind of thing, or just like some people on the team thinks like, oh, we are a great team. Maybe not everyone thinks that, but it shows you also a little bit like, we are a good team, but we can be better.
Yeah, I would totally agree with Sven. I think the team health monitor play is an excellent place to start. Totally echo Sven's advice not to try to jam pack a day full of every play you can fit. People's brains can only handle so much of that. You got to sort of be humane with your teams. But I think something I would add, something I've seen teams do within Atlassian is you can kind of customize the health monitor to your team, to your specific needs. And if engagement is something that you sense is sort of lacking on your team, I would sort of start by focusing on almost treat it as its own category to review in a health monitor type play of like, it seems like this team is sort of lacking engagement. Let's dig in and try to diagnose it together. Like, what is sort of, preventing people? It could be, and then you'll get a lot of useful information from that, whether it's, oh, we don't really understand why we're doing this work, or, or we've all got sort of or we don't have enough time to sort of have social time together as a team. There's lots of potential reasons for it. So I think the health monitor is a great format for sort of having that conversation and giving everyone a space to sort of look at the problem together and come up with solutions. So I'm a big fan of that play as well.
Cool. There are a bunch of questions that came in about Compass. A lot of people curious about what we were sharing about Compass. Someone asked, what do you use for your internal developer platform? So Dan, I think this could be a great opportunity to just share with folks a little bit about Compass. Do you want to give folks the TLDR?
Yeah, sure. So I'm pleased to share, if anyone was wondering, do you use Compass internally within Atlassian? Absolutely, we do. I think, there's a lot of capabilities in Compass today and a lot more that are being shipped, but on a very base level, one of the simplest things that it does is also one of the most powerful, which is simply providing a standard way of structuring information. I mentioned earlier that a lot of time is spent on a lot of teams just waiting, waiting for you need to ask a question, you're not sure where to find information. I think a lot of people who aren't developers actually probably don't even quite appreciate how much time developers spend just looking for information, whether it's like, where does this upstream service live? Where's the API documentation for it? What team owns it? How do I get in touch with them? Right? Like, a lot of companies have this information, it's either tribal knowledge where it's not written down anywhere and you just have to ask around and hope for the best, or it is written down, but it might be just sort of in their Confluence or Google Docs or wherever, just sort of sprawled about, right? Without any sort of standard way of finding it. So you're sort of, what Compass lets you do is say, every component at this company, there's a standard view. This is the team that owns it. This is where the API docs live. Here's where the code lives. And here's all of the dependencies upstream and downstream. And so at Atlassian, we use it heavily for that purpose. I think teams are able today, using Compass, to find answers to those types of questions orders of magnitude faster than they could in the past, where it really was a game of ask around, and see what you can find. I mentioned Compass is, there's a lot more capabilities still being added. It's a product that hasn't gone GA yet. It's still in beta. And so it's not the only tool we use internally. You know, we obviously use a combination of Compass. Our teams use Jira. Our teams use Bitbucket. Our teams use all of our own tools. And then there's internal tooling that we've built to provide some of the kind of capabilities that we've talked about previously. And sort of the way Atlassian has worked with our products for a long time is we'll build sort of these internal capabilities and gradually sort of mature them and productize them, and then make them available to customers. And that's very much what we're doing with Compass as well.
Yeah, great answer, Dan. A lot of people, there are a bunch of questions about, is Compass in a closed beta? How do I get myself onto the Compass waitlist? And I can just answer that one for everyone really quickly. Is the good news is it's an open beta, and like almost all of our products that we have out there, you can just spin it up, try it out for free, and it's free during the entirety of the time that it's in beta. So highly recommend if folks want to try it out. Definitely give it a spin. One of the newest DevOps products and innovations that we have from Atlassian. Next question that we have, which I think actually would be great to hear from both Sven and Dan on, is how can you connect developer joy to an empirical measurement that leadership is requesting? Or, I guess, said quickly, like, how do you measure developer joy? Sven, maybe do you want to start with that, and then we can hear from Dan after?
Yeah, I shared first. I shared we're running surveys, internal surveys, and I shared some of this engineering focused questions that we are asking, and that shows actually how much developers satisfied with certain areas, like wait time. Are you satisfied with wait time? And that's actually the number one thing that I hear. Like, developers are not satisfied with the wait time. Also, just like, this is just like not really a measurement, but you get a sentiment of where are you as an organization that you also can report upwards. But also, I think like quality metrics are also a great thing to just like show like how you're doing, and that you can report upwards, like improving quality metrics in your team. Also a great way to just like show your developer joy, because the code, as I said, like if the code quality is just like great, you enjoy working with the code, right? No one wants to work with shitty code. It's just like a fact. Everyone wants to work with great code. So also this is just like how to improve. And also if you just like can be faster, just like your review times get faster. Also, this is what you enjoy, like your code gets reviewed faster. So there are some measurements actually that directly connects with developer joy.
Yeah, I do. I would agree with Sven that I think surveys collecting it's it's a qualitative thing, but you make it quantitative by sending surveys and asking developers sort of focused questions about how satisfied are you with your tools? How productive do you feel? Are you able to get your job done? These kinds of things are really good to ask directly. The reason I think it's really important to do that is I think there's a temptation to say like, okay, developers' feelings are like too squishy. Let's like just focus on real cold, hard facts and like focus on just like cycle time, lines of code produced, these kinds of things. It's like, we all know that any metrics like that are just looking at sort of numerical things are sort of gameable, right? And they don't really necessarily tell you, especially if you start incorporating them into like performance assessments, right? Like you tell people how you're going to measure them, they'll change their behavior to sort of optimize for what you're measuring. And that doesn't necessarily tell you that your teams are actually sort of shipping high quality code at a good steady clip. Whereas something that people aren't going to fake is like, are they satisfied or aren't they with the tools you've provided them and their ability to get their work done? In general, productive people are more happy. Unproductive people are less happy. So I think it's not like it's not like I would only measure that one thing and nothing else, but I would say you need that signal to be a part of your overall sort of picture of the health of your organization. And if engineering leaders don't care about developer joy or any sort of developer satisfaction, I really think they're neglecting a really important signal.
Thanks, Dan. So we've got time for just like maybe one or two more questions, and then we'll wrap it. Dan, really quickly, someone said, do all of Daniel's gizmos depend on the SEM integration? What integrations, Dan, can you just recap for folks what integrations into Jira software you were highlighting?
My gizmos, I like it. Yeah. So most of them, so I covered, the dev info panel and the issue view on the board, things like that, the deployments view. The good news is, I don't know if what the person asking was sort of implying, but yes, they mostly all rely on integrating with your SCM tool. Namely, the main ones are GitHub, GitLab, and Bitbucket. They all have integrations that you can install into Jira software. The good news is that it's really easy. Once you connect it, all you have to do is install the app, and then every commit message that your devs write in their Git repositories, if they just reference the Jira issue key, all of that stuff sort of magically appears for you. So there's not a lot of setup you have to do. You just have to sort of like socialize with your teams. Hey, mention the Jira issues you're working on in your commit messages, or in your pull request titles, or in your branch names. You can pretty much put them anywhere, and we'll pick up on if you're referencing the work that in Jira that you're working on. It'll appear in the issue view. It'll appear on the board. We'll look at the deployments, that you're doing with pipelines or Jenkins or GitHub Actions. We'll pick up on all of that information. We'll pull it into Jira for you. So yeah, you do need to install the app, and once you do it, just reference your work, and it'll all show up like magic.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, we're at the hour, so I'm just going to I'm going to pull us a little long, but I'm going to do one more question. So maybe Sven and Dan, if you guys can just give us one closing comment on, are there any quick wins? Leave folks with, are there any quick wins that folks can take advantage of, or, as it relates to developer experience? Sven, do you want to pick us up?
Yeah, I can go. Definitely. Quick wins for developer experience. I think like making it, as we already said, making a combination out of your measurement that you take, trying to improve those, and also talk about those measurements, like in tech ops. Sometimes things seem to just like turn longer, but you're working on complicated stuff on the code, so it's fine. It's okay that the measurements just like go down or go up or whatever, and which direction. But talk about it. I think this is just like talk to your developer folks, and also the surveys are a good way to just like get a sentiment of how you feel as a developer. That would be my final words.
Thanks, Sven. Dan?
Yeah, Sven gave kind of a culture one, so I'll give the tools one. It really is. I mean, I'm just repeating myself, but it really is that if your teams are using Bitbucket, GitHub, or GitLab, just installing that one app, and like I said, communicating to your team, start referencing the work they're doing. It's gonna pull in so many experiences in Jira that reduce context switching. And I guarantee if you haven't done that already and you do it, you'll probably have team members coming to you and saying like, this is super useful that suddenly all this information is showing up here. But I also totally agree with Sven on, like how we said, run a single team health monitor and start to diagnose things. I think if you've never sent out a survey before, send out the first one. Tell the teams, hey, we're going to actually start paying attention to this. We want to know how things are going. I think you'll learn a lot even from that very first survey, and asking your devs what would make them more productive, what would make them happier, what things are getting in their way. You'll learn a lot from the first one. So that's a quick win for sure.
Awesome. Okay, well that's a wrap. So thank you, Dan. Thank you, Sven. Thank you to everyone for joining on and for all the awesome questions. And I guess I would just close by saying, check out all the resources we have available for you all. There's a lot of interesting stuff that folks can learn from, and that's a great jumping off point from this webinar. So thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thanks.